Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello and good morning, everyone, to this very important webinar on the topic of Pak-Iran cooperation in the counter-terrorism efforts. We all know that the border region of Pakistan and Iran has faced a lot of terrorist incidents that have led to the border skirmishes between the two countries back in January 2024 as well. Both Iran and Pakistan have been the victim of terrorist activities, specifically emanating from Afghanistan. Pakistan is facing challenges by the successionist groups like PLA. Likewise, Iran has been facing turbulence in East Sistan province through some of the terrorist organizations like Jaish-ul-Adl. To speak more on that, we have invited the eminent speaker, Mr. Abdul Basit, who is the Senior Research Associate at Sir Rajaratnam School of International Studies based in Singapore. We welcome you, Mr. Abdul Basit, for joining us on this very important topic. Before moving on to you, I would like to invite President IRS, Ambassador Johar Salim, for his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Good morning, Assalamu alaikum. It's a delight for me to addressing this webinar on a very important subject, Iran-Pakistan cooperation in counter-terrorism efforts, that is. And I'm pleasure also to welcome Basit, Senior Associate Fellow at the Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, who I'm sure would add a great deal of value to the subject. Now, we have to remember that both Iran and Pakistan face threats from terrorist organizations operating along the porous 900-kilometer border, especially in Balochistan and Sistan regions. Then groups like Jaish-ul-Adl and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan have targeted security forces and civilians in both countries. Iran and Pakistan have also established joint border committees to enhance intelligence sharing and coordinated operations. Regular high-level military meetings, as well as security dialogues between the two countries, have strengthened counterterrorism cooperation. Just in November 2024, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi visited Pakistan to discuss enhancing cooperation against terrorism. And that led to the commitment for strengthened efforts from both sides. Both countries have also agreed to increase border fencing, surveillance, and joint patrols to curb cross-border militancy. In April 2024, Iran and Pakistan agreed to station liaison officers at the mutual border to coordinate counterterrorism efforts. Then again, intelligence sharing agreements that have been signed they have helped in tracking and eliminating terrorist networks operating in both countries. In January 2024, both countries conducted cross-border operations targeting militant groups in Pakistan and Iran. Periodic military exercises and operations have been conducted to dismantle the terrorist hideouts. In June 2022, earlier in 2023, China, Pakistan, and Iran had held their first ever counterterrorism dialogue aiming to enhance regional security through collaborative efforts. That could also be done through regional institutions like SCO. We have to remember that SCO has a regional anti-terrorism structure called RATS. So there's a great deal of ongoing cooperation for which there are multiple reasons, and that shows the commitment of both the countries to rooting out terrorism and to ensure that their soil is not used for any terrorist activities in the other country. Because both Iran and Pakistan, they're brotherly countries. They've had a long history of cooperation and relations of cordiality and amity. And that is why we see that despite very many attempts by terrorist groups to create a rift between the two countries, such nefarious designs have not succeeded, and the two countries continue their cooperation in the field of counterterrorism. Now, I'll stop here because I'm very keen to um, listen to our eminent speaker today, who has a great deal of share. So I once again welcome him and all the participants of this webinar and look forward to a very informative session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to move on to Mr. Abdul Basit. Sir, over to you. Kindly elaborate us on since you are the expert on counter violent extremism as well as terrorist activities in the South Asia, particularly in the Afghanistan region as well. So kindly elaborate us that how the issue of terrorism could be a binding force in consolidating the ties of Pakistan and Iran, since both the countries are facing this issue for quite some time.
Thank you, Faraz. First of all, good morning and assalamu alaikum. I'm grateful to Institute of Regional Studies, Ambassador George Salim, President IRS, Faraz, my good friend or colleague, uh, Imran Sardar, for giving me this opportunity. Now, I think I'm going to have a very difficult time while you will be having an interesting time with me for the next 30 to 40 minutes because I wish I was an eminent speaker and an expert. I'm just a student of, violent movements, terrorism, counterterrorism in the region, and I've been trying to understand, motivations, push and pull factors of why political violence persist in our part of the world, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, especially the border areas. Border areas keep coming up. Porous nature of these borders persistently repeated in commentaries, research, speeches, dialogues. Uh, People living on both sides of these borders, whether they are Baloch in Iran, Sistan, Balochistan province, Pakistani Balochistan, or some Balochs living in the tri-border area, or whether it is the Pashtun living across Pakistan, Afghanistan border. Those borders and the way of life there, what is known as the informal economy, uh, it and the organized criminal syndicates and non-state violent actors, they all intersect at some level. All these things intersect at some level. Uh, Doing security in such areas which are thinly populated, terrain is very, very unforgiving, is not easy task. Pakistan has fenced its borders. Iran is trying to do the same. Still, there are challenges. Uh, Before I get into the heart of the topic, it's important to point out certain things. One I did already. The other is the love-hate relationship of these two countries with these violent non-state actors. And that's the elephant in the room, and I think we shouldn't ignore it. Something that we are not going to discuss for obvious reasons, but we know where Kulbhushan Yadav was operating from, right? We know where BLA and BLF have their hideouts, and we all also aware of where Jeshul Adal operates from now. As long as that policy, which at some level has some semblance of acceptability for how the two countries have been managing their geopolitics, be rest assured that non-state violence or militant violence is going to persist for these reasons and several other reasons. Among them are porous nature of the border, the volatile and hostile nature of this neighborhood, not just Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Pakistan, and with Central Asia, so on and so forth. This is a very, very hostile and a very happening neighborhood where the sheer number of militant actors, if you look at it, go to NECTA's websites and see how many proscribed organizations are on its list. the number is 70 plus. And some of these groups are very, very dangerous, lethal groups. So the sheer number of this group, the easy availability of weapons in the black market, the weapons that Americans have left. If you see recent years, the kind of weaponry that TTP, Baloch separatists are using, these are American weapons. Back in the day, these were Russian weapons, AK-47s, but now the M4 carbine rifles and those kind of weapons are, fitted with thermal scopes, sniper rifles, better communication systems are being used with the Americans left in Afghanistan or are being sold in the black market. So as times have changed, these actors have become very smart as well. So that we have to keep in mind that as long as that doesn't change, I think counter-terrorism uh, between Iran and Pakistan will only have tactical utility. I mean, it will come and go, but it will not lead to anything substantive in terms of achieving strategic objective, which is a violence-free region. That is not going to happen. Now, Ambassador Salim has made my job difficult because whatever exists as far as counter-terrorism is concerned between Iran and Pakistan, he has listed that already. So at the bilateral level, I think since the two countries uh, exchanged missile attacks and drone attacks earlier last year, January or February of 2024, Iran claimed of hitting Jeshul Adal's alleged hideouts, and then Pakistan responded by hitting BLA's hideouts or sanctuaries in Sistan, Balochistan, other areas. Immediately after that, former late Iran's president, Sheikh Ibrahim Raisi was here, and then a dialogue started. That dialogue resulted in at least forming and stationing these liaison officers at the colonel level. One sits in Turbat, the other sits in Zahedan to check the cross-border movement, improve coordination, remove any gaps which are there in the border security, and try to address each other's concern so that the incidents happening at the border skirmishes, cross-border attacks, they do not take place and they do not result in any escalation of violence between these two countries. What happened in January of 2024 was unprecedented. But the speed at which both countries resolved those differences and removed those challenges and irritant is equally laudable. Since then, we have seen that while it is very difficult for any country to stop all forms of violence at such borders, I think more or less the mechanism seems to be working because, yes, tactical level violence does exist, but no major security lapse or no major escalation has happened since then. That one and a couple of other incidents before that are notable exceptions to how the security is managed at the Pakistan Iran border. So that bilateral mechanism is there. With China, Iran and Pakistan also have a trilateral or a minilateral, but that I think that initiative or that dialogue has, in a way, if not become defunct, it has become dormant because the last meeting took place in June 2023, and after that, I cannot see any other meeting taking place. And I believe one reason for that was because in January, when these missile attacks took place, which were initiated by Iran, China offered mediation, in my knowledge. Uh, and they offered a dialogue in that setting, that trilateral setting. But I think Pakistan's considered position on that was that since Iran initiated it as unprovoked, so Pakistan would like to, see what steps Iran will take to de-escalate and address Pakistani reservation. And if Iran had any reservation, Iran could have used diplomatic channels, or Iran could have taken the matter to that trilateral meeting rather than, launching unprovoked attacks. And I think that is when the late Iranian president, may he rest in peace, came to Islamabad, and then they explained the perspective, and then a bilateral uh, mechanism started. Since then, I think the trilateral, uh, dialogue between Iran, Pakistan, and China hasn't taken place. That format or that structure was created following the Taliban's takeover. Because once the US withdrew from this region, uh, for all the bad things associated with the American presence in the region, which was one reason of a lot of violence and instability, it was also that America kept certain pressure on certain groups, and they weren't able to operate as freely as we see them operating now. But since the US withdrew, and counterterrorism is not America's top priority anymore, it's not even a top among the top 10 priorities. It focus, attention, resources, manpower, politics, everything has been diverted towards great power competition. So there was a gap. And America withdrew, terminating the so-called war on terror. But we know that terrorism in this region has not ended. So perhaps American war on terror has ended, but for so many countries like Pakistan, Iran, the war on terror or the struggle against terrorism continues. So there was a need to fill those gaps. And I think what America then started doing to protect its own security interests vis-a-vis terrorist group like this Islamic State of Khorasan, Al Qaeda, and other groups, they started minilaterals with different countries. They started this with Central Asian states. They opened a dialogue through Qatar with the Taliban to look after American security interests. Then China perhaps did the same. Not perhaps, China exactly did the same. It created its own minilaterals. So China created two minilaterals. One was with Pakistan, Afghanistan, China. The other was Iran, Pakistan, and China. Because Chinese interests in both countries are quite high. Stakes are very high. They signed the China-Iran strategic deal with Tehran, and they have China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is a very important node of its Belt and Road initiative in Balochistan and projects in other parts of Pakistan. And those projects do face terrorist threat from groups like BLA, ISKP, TTP. So China started that minilateral to address those concerns and to fill those counter-terrorism gaps which were emerging in this region. And so that's the trilateral setting. And then, as Ambassador George Salem outlined, both countries have this multilateral CT cooperation as well under SCO's structure, which is known as RATS, which is Regional Anti-Terrorism Structure. Not much happens there, but definitely these avenues are there for these countries to discuss any challenges that they do face as far as border security is concerned, as far as cross-border violence is concerned, and movement of these groups in border areas is concerned. We have seen that both countries have cooperated. They have addressed each other's concern, but that happens silently. That happens silently and doesn't come out much in media. There has been a recent development where, and it's not as recent, it happened sometime mid last year, when, if you remember, the Kerman suicide attack, which took place when late General Qasim Soleimani's on his death anniversary, that ISKP carried out a suicide attack in Iran, which was one of the deadliest attacks on the Iranian soil in recent years. Uh, so mid last year, uh, Pakistan arrested some of the operatives of ISKP involved in these attacks and who were trying to set up a base in Balochistan. They were arrested. And among these people, this guy, Tariq Tajiki, who's an Afghan national and goes by the alias of Abdullah Koita. If you Google this, you will see pro-Iranian or pro-state Iranian social media channels, tweeting about it, that he's in Iranian custody. So these people, him and there were three others, they were trying to set up a base for attacks in Europe as well. They were arrested to the credit of Pakistani security institutions and they were handed over to Iran. Now, when that happened, uh, we saw that Wahid Kambar Baloch, who is a Baloch nationalist separatist, and he lived in Kerman as well. He was handed over to Pakistani authorities. So I think this cooperation is in a way reciprocal, or tit for tat. You do something for us, and we'll do something for you in return. This is how this uh, relationship on security, border security, non-state violent actors, organized criminal syndicates, smuggling networks is evolving. Now, it is important to say a bit on Iran's own relationship with some of these groups and the way Iran has created, some monopolies in ensuring that its interests are secured and it remains relevant in terms of forcing negotiations to address those problems. Uh, Iran has this love and hate relationship, with non-state violent actors. We all know that nobody, has mastered the art of proxy warfare better than Iran. Iran's influence now that has been hurt badly. If you look at the way uh, uh, the Hezbollah's leadership, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, Fuad Shukr, Hamas's leadership, Ismail Haniyeh, was killed in Iran, and the fall of the Assad regime, that structure in a way has been shaken badly. Syria, served as a bridge between Iran uh, and Iraq, uh, uh, you know, uh, and Lebanon to help these groups, provide them strategic guidance. For now, that has been disrupted. But if you go back post 9/11, Iran has been hosting, Al Qaeda families, and those Al Qaeda used the Iranian territory to travel to Middle East and return to Afghanistan. They use this route in return for ensuring that the Iranian border was safe from the U.S. presence. So Western Afghanistan, if you see, even at the height of the war on terror, western parts of Afghanistan, Herat and other areas, they were doing fantastically well as far as economy is concerned, as far as culture is concerned. These areas were relatively peaceful, and cross-border trade with Iran was flourishing, thanks to these understandings where even the Taliban did not go in and do violence there. Uh, and Al Qaeda, Iran created this monopoly over Al Qaeda to make sure that they did not pick up a war with Iran, and it is ironic and interesting both that if you read Abbottabad letters, which were made public by CTC West Point Center. You Google and this document appears. So the letter that Zawahiri and Bin Laden wrote to the leader of Al Qaeda in Iraq, which later became the so-called Islamic State or Daesh, was leader Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, because he started sectarian war in Iraq to win sympathies of Iraqi Sunni population. He started that with the bombing of the Askari mosque, and they wrote a letter to him that by killing Muslims, what will he get out of it? And they also mention their pact with Iran, which allows them to travel and which allows them to use that channel not only for travel but also for medical help and all. That relationship will be destroyed. So Iran has kept that relationship even today. If again, couple of years ago, if you see the number two of Al Qaeda before Al Zawahiri's assassination in Kabul. Again, there are several names. Keep forgetting some. Abu Muhammad al Masri. He was killed by the Israeli agents in Iran, and that tells you these families are still. And Bin Laden's own family was in Iran. So what happened that in Yemen, Al Qaeda abducted some Iranian diplomats and then negotiated the release of Bin Laden's family in exchange for those diplomats. And that is when his Bin Laden's third wife, Amal, reunited with him. Anyways, and current Al Qaeda leader, Saif al Adl, who is a former Egyptian military commander, is the de facto leader of Al Qaeda, is suspected to be still living in Iran. That's their history. But with the Daesh, which is the rebel Al Qaeda group, they have a relationship of hostility. So what then Iran did was it recruited, trained, and launched its own militias, uh, Zanabiyun and Fatimiyun Brigade. The Fatimiyun Brigade from Afghanistan, the Zanabiyun Brigade from Pakistan, and then there are other Shia militias, which played a very, very important role in defeating Daesh, both in Iraq as well as in Syria. So the territorial losses of Daesh in Iraq, Qasem Soleimani actually is the architect of defeating Daesh in Iraq. And the last territorial holding of Daesh in Syria was Kobani, which the group lost in April 2018, if I'm correct, April or May of 2018. So these groups, played a pivotal role in defeating Daesh. Now, while doing that counterterrorism, Iran created these non-state militias, which then became difficult for Iran to control as well. Nevertheless, that uneasy relationship continued, and what Iran did, pretty much what they did in Afghanistan, they tried creating a buffer where they made sure that in return for keeping, certain Al Qaeda families hosting them, and for Iran opened up to Taliban in 2015, because that's the time when the US, announced that they will withdraw from Afghanistan by December of 2014 and withdrew the bulk of their troops from Afghanistan. That's when Iran opened up to uh, Taliban as well. And Taliban created one of their, opened one of their offices in 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 Iran as well. I forgot the area where they were in Mashhad, if I'm correct. It was in Mashhad. And if you remember, the former Taliban chief, Akhtar Mohammad Mansour, was killed in a US drone attack in Balochistan when he was returning from Iran. So Iran opened up, and the deal was that the western parts of Afghanistan will serve as a buffer zone between the US and Iran. Taliban will ensure that, and in return, they will have an open border policy where Taliban could go rest, uh, take some medical help, etc. And some Taliban leader kept their families there. Pretty much, Iran did the same vis-a-vis Daesh. So they tried to create these buffer by having these Shia militias in place to keep this Salafist jihadi group Daesh away from their border. So Iran's counterterrorism that way has been both at the state and non-state level. Uh, at the state level, I think IRGC uh, plays an important role. But if you look at Iran internally, the threat to Iran on Iranian soil is less from non-state actors like Jaishul Adal. Yes, Jaishul Adal continues to inflict intermittent violence. You'll hear about 4 or 5 every year. Some are low level, others are more serious. But generally 4 to 5, not more than that. The real threat, terrorist threat to Iran, comes from Israel's state terrorism. The threat to the Iranian nuclear program, involvement in killing Iranian nuclear scientists, involvement in killing, the Al Qaeda leaders. So when that happened, and you look at what happened when Ismail Haniyeh was killed, uh, Iran realized that at all levels of its security structure, they are badly infiltrated, and there are several gaps in their security structure as far as Israel is concerned. So then, what has been a blessing in disguise for Iran is its rapprochement with the Saudis. Since then, Iran has been able to focus more, and it has turned attention towards Pakistan as well, trying to forge a cooperation on security. But this cooperation pretty much stays very, very technical. It doesn't move beyond managing border. It doesn't move beyond ensuring that cross-border militant violence is controlled. But what hasn't happened, and which I would like to see, but that dialogue hasn't happened, is uh, Iran hasn't given a commitment that BLA and BLF, Allah Nazar, and Bashir Zaib's group, they will be expelled, and the same commitment of Jaishul Adal being expelled or dismantled from these areas. One can question the feasibility of that, given the fact that if it was for the capacity of the forces, why the Baloch separatists have not been eliminated? Is it that easy to wrap up Jaishul Adal on this side of the border and overthrow, expel BLA, BLF from that side of the border? Maybe there are those difficulties, but putting those difficulties aside, uh, the verbal commitment doesn't exist. We haven't seen that, which means that both countries would like to keep those monopolies against each other while cooperating at the border. And I think this is where the main challenge lies. And what adds to that challenge then is where both Iranian and Pakistani counter-terrorism interests do converge despite several differences, despite that uneasy history of stationing groups or at least tolerating them on their respective soils, is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is where they have some unanimity of views, and common enemies. To start with, it is ISKP, Islamic State of Khorasan province. Now, ISKP has carried out attacks as far afield as Turkey. The Santa Maria Church attack, repeatedly in Iran. The major last attack was Kerman. It has carried out attacks in Pakistan, in Balochistan, in the newly merged districts. If you remember, in Bajor, they targeted Jamiyat Ulama Islam Fazl's Workers Convention. There are several other attacks in one of the Shia mosques in Peshawar. Suneri Mosque, if I'm correct, was targeted, was one of the deadliest violent attacks against the Shia community in recent years. And they have carried out attacks in Central Asia, the Caucasus City attack in Moscow. So the major threat emanating from the Afghan soil is ISKP. So I think that's one area where not only both countries would like and they do push the Taliban to do more, keep its commitment on the Doha Agreement. Clearly, Taliban are in violation of Doha Agreement as far as hosting TTP is concerned. TTP's cross-border militant violence is concerned. If you see the UN committee's report on ISIL, which is Daesh and Al Qaeda, the recent one just came out like a week ago. Um, the common threat is in Afghanistan. Al Qaeda is still in this region, not as strong as it was back in the day. It's more of an ideological movement which serves or acts as mothership or a vanguard of jihadism for various franchises in different parts of the world. But they have a deep nexus with the Taliban, and that is what is alarming. And Pakistan and Iran, also share views of an inclusive government in Kabul, where other groups should be given space as well. And the kind of policies the Taliban have towards women and education, they do, have similarity of views on that as well. Uh, on ISKP, one common challenge for both countries is that for now, yes, American interests have moved towards Asia Pacific on containing China. So the war theater is moving towards Asia. Trump is trying to close the Russia-Ukraine chapter and focus attention, resources, manpowers on containing China. Yes, but one group which they believe is capable of undermining the homeland security is ISKP. So I think these countries then would like to see ISKP's threat downgraded. Otherwise, if one major attack takes place, it could, divert some attention of the US towards the region. And if they then try to create some form of presence here, it could be a challenge, both for Iran as well as for Pakistan. Of course, Taliban will not tolerate any such thing, but that refocus is gonna be a challenge, and that is why ISKP not only poses a physical threat to these countries as far as terrorist attacks are concerned, cross-border violence is concerned, radicalization and violent extremism is concerned, but also redrawing American attention towards Afghanistan. Uh, Taliban have done a decent job, I'll say, as far as tactical counterterrorism against ISKP is concerned. With the American intelligence guiding them, they ruthlessly crushed and decapitated the top leadership of ISKP. But then ISKP has managed to, weather that CT pressure, and their ability to mount overseas attacks has remained intact. And the paradox with ISKP is if you look at different terrorist groups like Al Qaeda, ISIL in Iraq and Syria, as well as Al-Shabaab in Somalia. Groups which carried out, transnational attacks or overseas attacks. What was common in these groups was they had some territory under their control, or they had hospitable, uh, terrain or sanctuaries where they trained, planned, plotted, and executed their attacks. ISKPO is an exception to that rule. You have this group which doesn't have the kind of sanctuary that Al Qaeda enjoyed in Afghanistan, before that in Sudan, ISIL had in Syria and Iraq, or Al Shabaab has in Somalia. ISKP doesn't have that kind of territory. Still, it is leveraging its global network by recruiting vulnerable individuals and radicalizing them on the internet and using them for lone actor terrorism. So Al Qaeda, ISKP's sanctuary is digital. This group doesn't have a home address. It is deterritorialized, but it has a digital footprint, and it uses that. And I think that's where the danger is going forward as far as terrorism is concerned. That if ISKP manages to do one big attack, then the pressure will come back on these countries to do more. And yeah. And lastly, I think both states, while doing this counterterrorism, need to revisit their own policies as far as Iranian Sistan, Balochistan, and Pakistani Balochistan is concerned. They don't have a political strategy to address the genuine grievances, but there is an over-militarized framework which continues to suppress violence, but that suppression of violence then creates more grievances. Theoretically, counterinsurgency should be guided by a political strategy. A political strategy and a vision should guide how your security forces are going to create room for you to come and maneuver that space and turn that into a political advantage for long-term peace. As long as that is not there, you are not going to see, you are not going to see the situation changing too much. And here, what you have is ethno-separatist problem with these Baloch separatists. But on that side of the border, it is ethno-sectarian, because those in Iran, Sistan, Balochistan are not just Baloch, but they are Baloch Sunnis in the Shia majority Iran. Uh, if I try to wrap up, then I think what Iran and Pakistan have is encouraging, uh, and whatever they have, it is working for now. At the tactical level, it does work, because if you look at what happened in January 2024, was unprecedented, and chances were, if you see more sensationalist commentary, that these relationship will be frayed for long. That did not happen. They overcame the challenge quite quickly, and no big security lapse or major cross-border violence has happened. Yes, recently you have the army chief's statement in Balochistan referring to using the term frenemies, which one can read a lot into that. But the structure generally is working. The room for improvement is there. And as far as the big picture is concerned, I think these frameworks have tactical utilities. They are not going to change the presence of non-state actors uh, uh, in this territory. There are enough gaps there: territorial governance, security gaps, political gaps there, which will keep these groups pretty much invested in what they are doing and stay relevant to the geopolitics of these two countries and countries in the region. Uh, I'll stop here, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Basit. I'll now open the floor for question and answer sessions, and there are a couple of questions already present in the chat box. I'll read it out for you. The first question is from Mr. Arishullah Khan, the head of Afghanistan program here at IRS. And he asked that Iran seems to have an interesting relationship with Al Qaeda and its state sponsor in the shape of Taliban government. Given the evolving US Iran relations under Donald Trump, how do you see Iran's increasing its support to Al Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan? If yes, what could be its implications for Pakistan given the existing collaboration not only between Al Qaeda and the Afghan Taliban government, but also between the former two and the TTP?
यार इसको तोड़ के पूछो, ये बहुत लंबा है, ये तो पूरा एक बड़ी लंबी स्टोरी।
So the crux of this question is that if Iran has the history of state sponsorship of Al Qaeda as well as the Taliban government, how do you
Okay,
see that would Iran leverage its state sponsorship in its relation with the
okay, stop
US?
here. Okay, stop here, and then I'll take the other part of this. I think state sponsorship is a loaded term. I'll be reluctant to use that. Yes, Iran kept Al Qaeda in Iran. Families which were trying to cross move to the Middle East, they kept them in prison houses because nobody knew which way this war will go. So they wanted to, protect their own interests. Were they states sponsoring them? Uh, Iran did not sponsor Al Qaeda. Iran.
I'm sorry, Basit Saab. I had to unmute myself to clarify
Ji,
that
ji.
I did not use the phrase state terrorism
Okay, fair
in
enough.
the context of
Let's drop it.
Iran and Afghanistan. I used
Yes.
it in the context of Taliban government of Afghanistan and Al Qaeda.
Okay. Fair enough, sir. Thank you for clarifying. Will Iran's support for Al Qaeda continue? I think Al Qaeda is a very weak actor, almost inconsequential, irrespective of their deep nexus and continuing deep nexus with the Taliban. Even the Taliban are stuck with Al Qaeda for ideological reasons. So what they would like to do is not give up on them because it will hurt their image within the jihadist world. But they will not allow Al Qaeda to rearm and do what they did back in 2000, 2001. That is not going to happen. How is Iran's strategic calculus will be towards Taliban with Trump coming in? I think Iran's approach towards Taliban will be what is the regional approach of Russia, China, and India towards and Central Asia towards the Taliban, which is, and recently the Iranian foreign minister was in Kabul, right? So they would like to engage the Taliban, something which now Pakistan is also doing. That yes, the security challenges are there, but Ambassador Sadiq Khan has been reappointed to diplomatically engage with the Taliban because a lot of these regional connectivity projects are going to pass through Iran. So, 15 months going without diplomacy is not something that Pakistan can afford. So cooperation and security challenges, they coexist. So there will be diplomacy, but then there will be security challenges. So the state will try to find political solution to the security problems and respond wherever they will have to deal with the TTP challenge. So if you look at the regional approach, the countries are largely engaging the Taliban. Without recognizing them, I think Iran will do the same. Is Trump's return to power going to change the Iranian strategic calculus on Afghanistan? I don't think so. That's a separate matter. Yes, somehow it intersects, but the overall strategic calculus will pretty much remain the same because, see, in the Middle East, Iran has been weakened. Would they like to lose the monopoly they have in Afghanistan? Certainly no. They have given those signals to the Trump administration that it was the Trump administration which unilaterally scrapped GCPOA and the talks on. So if Trump wants to talk, they would like to return to the negotiation table. So Iranian strategic calculus will pretty much be aligned with the regional approach you see on Afghanistan. Iran is part of that quadrilateral dialogue on Afghanistan, which includes Pakistan, Iran, China, and Russia, right? So they will remain invested in that. With that, they will deal with the other challenges which do exist. Is there any part of the question that I haven't addressed for us?
Yes, and what are the implications of this policy towards Pakistan?
Implications for Pakistan. So if you see, there are positive and negative implications. Positive implications are that Iran also sees some groups in Afghanistan as a security challenge. Pakistan does that. They are different groups. For Iran, the challenge is ISKP. For Pakistan, the challenge is TTP. And yes, some Baloch separatists, they still have some form of presence in Afghanistan for them. But to build pressure on the Taliban, that's the positive implication. The both countries can work together there. As far as the negative implication of Iran engaging is the port diplomacy. They have Chabahar, we have Gwadar. Taliban are reaching out to India, and India is trying to convince them to do trade with India through the Chabahar port, while we have on off closed our borders, and we wanted or still want them to use Karachi and Gwadar ports. So Iranian presence in Kabul, while our ties are frayed with the Taliban, is to convince them that that port is open for you. But I think the cost involving doing trade with that port it's not practical. And with Trump now withdrawing aid from the Taliban and Afghani falling precipitously, I think the Taliban will review, what their economic options are going to be. So we know that, formally or informally, the wheat goes from Pakistan, commodities go from Pakistan, even, dollar was smuggled into Afghanistan from Peshawar. We know all that. So yeah, that's a challenge, whether you see it as a negative implication or a challenge, that they are pitching Chabahar port to them. After India's diplomatic engagement, the presence of Iranian foreign minister in Kabul is quite meaningful. So Pakistan then has to see that will they leave that space open for these countries, or will Pakistan resume its diplomacy and try to, at least how do you isolate your security challenges from economic cooperation? It's easier said than done, but yes.
Mr. Basit, you talked about that both Pakistan and Iran are the part of quadrilateral alliance, including Russia and China, as well as the trilateral consultation mechanism as well, in which China, Pakistan, and Iran are present. And both the countries are the part of SCO, and the RATS mechanism of SCO could also be activated, though it is inactive. Do you see that by inviting the representatives from Afghanistan Taliban government into such consultative meetings in quadrilateral and trilateral framework would be beneficial to root out or to alleviate the issue of terrorism, specifically for both Pakistan and Iran, since both of them share the border?
You see, issue is Taliban do not consider TTP as a terrorist group. For them, they are their jihadi brothers. So perspectives are different, right? ISKP, yes. ISKP, yes. I'm not. I haven't seen. I'll be very interested to see what uh, what is Taliban's perspective on BLA. How do they describe them? The way we just said, like, the state sponsorship of terrorism is a loaded term. I would like to see diplomatically how the Taliban describe BLA or BLF for that matter. TTP definitely for them is not a terrorist. Uh, uh, can terrorism be addressed by including the Taliban in these? See, issue is when you deny something, because ISKP is a group that Taliban are after as well, and they are in hot pursuit of these people. They are very, very hostile, and Taliban's policy towards ISKP until recent year has been take no prisoners, take no prisoners. They would neutralize them. They are so ruthless towards ISKP. So on ISKP, yes, Taliban would be happy to talk to anybody, even Israel. ISKP, yes, come talk to us. Whether it's rats, whether it's bilateral or a trilateral, they would be happy to talk. The problem is TTP. Al Qaeda, they say there is no Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. They even say Zawahiri hasn't been killed in Kabul. So something that they deny, how can you expect cooperation from them? TTP, no, because they don't. Because if we use, the contestation is, or the argument is, you are hosting them, then that's the problem statement. If that's the problem statement, then what kind of cooperation you expect? I think we'll have to wait on this, and we'll have to take actions, both carrot and stick, to change Taliban's strategic calculus. Until that doesn't change, we are not going to get any cooperation as far as TTP is concerned. ISKP, yes. So you can include Taliban in these frameworks. Afghanistan, if I'm correct, is within SCO, whether observer status or full member, that I'm not aware of. But they're there. So if they're there, they are part of rats. Within that, you can talk about ISKP, TTP. They'll say, it's a and their framing is quite interesting in a sense that they say this is Pakistan's internal matter. So Pakistan has to decide what does it want to do with TTP. And when that comes, they say talks, relocation, but kinetic actions, no. Yeah.
Thank you, Basit Saab. Just last couple of questions. You are well aware about the Assad's collapse in Syria and the situation that unfolded in the Syria, the coming over of HTS government into Syria, and there are reports that HTS government are in coordination with both TTP as well as Afghan Taliban government, specifically in Afghanistan. So do you see that HTS takeover in Syria might increase the threshold of terrorism inside South Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran border?
Afghanistan. So, uh, so Iran recruited Shia militias from Afghanistan, from Pakistan. Uh, they were in Syria. Uh, some of them were in Iran, came back to Iran after Daesh lost its territorial holdings in Syria. They were in Iran, but when COVID took place, some of them hastily returned to Pakistan. Others are rushing back after Assad's fall. Um, they are coming back, yes. Uh, uh, is this going to increase terrorism in South Asia? I think, this region, Afghanistan particularly, was for a want of a better term, these are very loaded terminologies, but because my memory is not with me, was the so-called epicenter of global jihadism. Al Qaeda was here, 9/11, they planned and executed from Afghanistan, and we know the war on terror was fought in Afghanistan, then it went to Iraq as well. But with the emergence of Daesh in Iraq and Syria, the ground zero shifted. A lot of these foreigners who were holed up in parts of Afghanistan, Pakistan, border area and Afghanistan, they left the region and they went to the Middle East. You can Google this and you'll find it. Al-Zawahiri's statement that for them, the central focus is the Middle East. It's not Afghanistan. They were using Afghanistan for residence, but their focus was very much in the Middle East, because when America said we are withdrawing, Al Qaeda, for all intents and purposes, thought that the war in Afghanistan has been won. It's only a matter of time. So, since then, for them, what was happening in Afghanistan was a psychological warfare, because it was a matter of when and not if that America will withdraw. You remember what Taliban used to say: "You have the watch, we have the time. We'll wait you out." They waited US out of Afghanistan. The center shifted to the Middle East, and then a lot of it has gone towards Africa now. So what I see, the reverse movement that I see back to South Asia, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan border is of the people recruited from this region who will quietly return in one way or the other. But other people, as far as the Salafi jihadist, and I'm very, very wary of these terms, so please don't judge me on the terms, but these are the terms that the literature uses. Sunni militants will move towards Africa, I guess, because that is where the center of gravity now is. I don't see them returning to. It's not in even in Taliban's interest that Afghanistan once again becomes the hub of what it was during the 1990s until early 2000s. They will not return here as of now for the foreseeable future. No, I don't see that happening.
Basit Saab, just one last question. Since you have mentioned that the focus of the US has been shifted towards Asia Pacific in containing China, the counterterrorism efforts is no longer the focus point of the US. And you have talked a lot about the tactical level cooperation between Pakistan and Iran in countering terrorism. What do you suggest about the strategic level or policy level counter-terrorism efforts between Pakistan and Iran specifically, since there is no existing strategy since the US has shifted its focus?
You see, the problem they create is tactical. So what you need is a tactical framework. Strategic, no. I mean, if you look at strategically, if you look at it, only perhaps China can convince the two countries, but for that their respective policies and their respective frameworks of how they see developments in the regions have to change, which is, I think, is unrealistic. Pakistan has a long history of relationship coalition, time-tested coalition with Saudi Arabia, right? You can argue that Saudis are now approaching with the Iranis. Why can't Pakistan do the same? Pakistan's calculus will only change when they see the evidence of that. So you don't change your policies and framework based on someone's intentions, but someone's actions. So there is a reason why Jaishul Adal continues to have some form of presence in Balochistan, right? And there is some deep logic to why BLA and BLF are still in Iran. So with that, how can you change and forge a strategic city? Cannot happen. Kulbhushan Yadav was in Iran, right? Chabahar rivals Gawadar. You can say ports don't rival each other. They are sister ports. They complement, but they compete as well. In today's world, I mean, unless the strategic calculus changes, how will that change? Geoeconomy offers one way out, but that's a very incremental process. Pakistan has started that. Pakistan is trying to be part of these regional connectivity plan. CPAC is one. Pakistan has opened up to China. They started that shipping created sea lanes between the Karachi and Chittagong port. They are starting those direct flights. The Afghan railway coming from Uzbekistan, from Herat, those areas connecting to Pakistan, that is happening. So Pakistan is trying to forge those economic ties, but that is a very, very incremental process. Also, because security is not fantastic in some parts of our country. B, neighborhood is very hostile, especially India. South Asia is the economically the least integrated region. The intra-regional trade or cooperation is just 5%, which is the lowest in the world. So it's a very incremental process. With that limited scope of geoeconomy, I don't see this happening. I don't, and strategic city cooperation with Iran, Saudi Arabia is our big brother. They will, they will tap our wrist and say, buddy, what are you up to? Given that they have parked their money in our, foreign reserves. I don't see this happening.
Thank you, Mr. Basit, for your time and effort you took here for enriching us and inspiring us on this topic. On the behalf of the President IRS Ambassador Johar Salim, my colleagues here at IRS and myself, I thank you. I thank you for your time and your enriching speech. And I hope that in the future as well, you will continue to guide us on this counter-terrorism efforts between Pakistan, Iran, as well as the entire region. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Bas.
Thank you, Faraz, for having me. It was great to be here. And